Hello and welcome to the Art of Costume podcast. I am your host, Spencer Williams, and thank you so much for joining me for another special bonus episode. I am so excited for today's episode because we are talking about the new film Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler. I'm absolutely obsessed with this film, just as you are, I'm sure. I've seen it twice. I'm excited for it to be re-released on IMAX again. Because I'm going to see it again because I love it that much. It has everything I love. It's a period film with some incredible themes, perfect storytelling with vampires and music too. So it's right up my alley in every sense of the word. But what I'm most excited about of all is talking about the costumes of Sinners, designed by one Ruth E. Carter. And I am beyond excited to say that today we are going to be joined by costume designer Ruth E. Carter, the same Ruth E. Carter that has won 2 Academy Awards for her work on Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but has also done so many incredible films in Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, Roots, Baps, Selma. We could go on and on, all the incredible work that Ruth has done. And honestly, Ruth has been someone that I've been dreaming to interview, talk with. I've met her before in passing, but I've never been able to have that one-on-one time. So today's the day. I'm very excited. We had a great conversation talking about all the different characters, the vampires, the blood, the music, that dream sequence that is so stuck in our heads. It was one of my favorite conversations I think we've ever had on this podcast, and I hope that you all enjoy it. So right after this break, we're going to get into that conversation with costume designer Ruth E. Carter. Please enjoy.
Hi, I'm Dan, who does all the magic behind the scenes. I wanted to say thank you, and if you want to support the show even farther, go to tpublic.com/user/theartofcostume, where you can buy a couple variations of our logo on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers. Also, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're an audio listener, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Now, back to the show.
I am beyond excited to finally welcome to the Art of Costume podcast 2-time Academy Award winner, costume designer Ruth E. Carter. Hey, Ruth, it's so good to finally see you.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, Spencer.
I'm so excited. I've seen Sinners twice now, and I'm so glad that this is a film I get to talk to you about because there's just so much to get into, so much history, so much research, and vampires, which is totally my thing. So let's get into it. But first, let's of course chat about the collaboration between you and one Ryan Coogler. Obviously, this is not your first film together, nor your second. So obviously something between the two of you just works because it really comes through in Sinners. So what is it about you and Ryan that just works so seamlessly between costumes and the direction of the film?
Mm-hmm. Well, Ryan is a brilliant director, writer. He also leaves space for all of us to create. You get his script and it resonates with you. It's enjoyable to go through the process of creative talk and throwing the ball back and forth about the possibilities. He sometimes has some specific ideas, like we have Papa Tito in the film. We have Smoke and Stack in Red and Blue, and those are some of the specific things that he brings up when we have our creative conversations, but he doesn't tell you exactly how to do it. He doesn't really try to do your job, and he leaves that space for you to present some things to him. And that's what makes it really nice to work with Ryan, because he's open. And even if you're stuck, you can talk to him, and he tries to help you through some, creative challenges.
Yeah, just giving you that little note on a tissue and just running with it. He trusts you.
He brings you in his office, you drink a cup of coffee, he loves coffee. So it's a nice experience working together.
And after doing, of course, 2 Black Panther films with him, I feel like you must have been ready to hit the ground running once you guys got into Sinners.
Well, we had to hit the ground running because we had a very short prep and a
Uh-huh.
very short window to shoot the film in. So you're constantly kind of devising your plan as you're looking at the script and seeing these moments that, will have to be multiplied because it's blood and it's a period piece. So you have to be very careful about what you have, rentals, or, you're using a lot of pieces that you're replicating. So the majority of that film was built.
Wow.
Because you can't get blood on rentals.
Yeah.
Once you do that, you own it and you own it for a high price. So we took our prototypes and the people in the Juke Joint that went out and then ended up, with blood on them as vampires. All that stuff was built. We built 90% of that film. I mean, there were things that were purchased, like overalls and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
Sammie's overalls and his shirt in the very beginning, but he quickly comes out of that and goes into his like juke joint look,
Yeah.
and all of that was made. All the patches were added. Nothing was rented.
Right. That certainly is a lot of blood in this, and we'll come back to that toward the end. So Sinners is set in Mississippi in 1932, and you've said in the production notes that in designing Sinners, you want it to feel like the old South, which can come down to textures and colors. So could you tell us a little bit about what your research and preparation process, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but getting into the 1930s of Mississippi, what did your process look like getting into that research?
Well, the old South, Southern Mississippi Delta, the South in general has its own look and feel,
Mm-hmm.
especially in 1931, when you did have large cotton plantations and sharecroppers and people who worked the land. And so it's a really special time. The South is always a special place that has its own feel still to today. But
Yeah.
we looked through a lot of photo research. There were photographers that traveled through the South in the early 30s, late 20s, and Dora Welty was one of them. And we just kind of got into the images of the blues players, all the old bluesmen that were adorned, dressed in their two-tone shoes and their vests and their suspenders, and it was really a joy to think that we were making a movie about the blues as well
Yeah.
as about vampires. But I focused on the research. I thought it was more like an American story. My palette was like red, white, and blue,
Yeah.
and the only two real characters that are outside of that color palette is Sammie with his gold vest and his brown coat, and Grace with her yellow. She's introduced in a yellow top. So, but
Oh,
for the
yeah.
most part, there's a lot of workwear and a lot of blue denim and indigo and haint blue, and we researched all of that: the voodoo, the hoodoo, the blues players, the Mississippi Delta. I mean, it was a time when people were disenfranchised and they had
Yeah.
nothing, but they made this beautiful music out of just wanting to rejoice and wanting to, have some time of pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the perfect person for this job. It was just
Oh,
so beautiful to see and seeing all the variety in these
oh,
costumes.
me? Perfect
Yeah.
person? Oh, thank you. Take
Well,
that.
speaking of the perfect person for the job, you quite famously dressed Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger in Black Panther. So there's a relationship there. And now you've worked with him as both Smoke and Stack in Sinners. So you're
Yeah.
kind of working with two characters here. Well, you are
Yeah.
working with two characters.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing there's a trust there. So could you tell us about that collaboration between the two of you in defining these characters? You mentioned Ryan said red and blue. So where do you
Red
go
and
from
blue.
there?
And, it was very stressful to think, how am I going to figure out the red side? The blue side, could be workwear and all those, great indigo colors of the old South, but the red was a challenge. And I found this beautiful brown wool that was leaning on the red side, and it had a red pinstripe in it. And I flew to LA to do some last minute shopping, and I just happened to go into a hat shop, and there was that red hat, and the blue denim cap was there too. I just was, determined to get those 2 points because that was going to finish up, the red. It was going to solidify like how they could look that way in red and blue. So then, it was like from that point, just pulling together shirts, the pink shirt that he wears, the blue shirt that Smoke wears, and kind of separating them in the fitting room. So when we traveled through all of the options for Smoke, we talked about, he has this holster he wears under his jacket. And so we don't want it to look bulky. We have to conceal like weapons, and that Smoke would be less conscious about, having all the accoutrements like Stack would. So as we firmed up our ideas for Smoke, we went on to the other side of the fitting room and we started dressing as Stack. And, right away, Michael's like kind of his demeanor changed, yeah, more just a little bit more swagger. And that's when Ryan Coogler and Zinzi, they walked into the fitting, and Ryan saw the hat and he was just to the moon. I mean, people came down from the office and said, "What's going on? Ryan's upstairs just talking about this red hat." And I really felt like I hit a home run having flown from New Orleans to LA to actually find the hat. I was determined to find the right character hat for him, and we did. So that was really gratifying that he came into the fitting as Michael was dressed in the suit we see him in the movie, and we all got excited. So his suit is cut, from 1920s pattern menswear, has the diagonal pockets, it has 3 small buttons, button closure. It's really has more detail. And then a Smoke suit is kind of like a patch pocket, safari style, houndstooth. He's a working man.
Yeah. Actress Wunmi Mosaku, who plays Annie, of course, she said in the notes that she actually noticed that the costumes gave Michael a different energy switching between the two characters because of their costumes. And I just think that really speaks to how important costume design is to the storytelling when you're able to put on that suit and now I'm Stack. Yeah.
I mean, just think of yourself, in the days you want to feel comfy you put on sweats, but the days you want to feel like maybe a little more in charge, you might put on a jacket. I mean, clothes do communicate your presentation. So yeah, he had to change out many times during the course of this shooting, and many times in one day even. So
yeah.
And Smoke's clothes fit him a little looser, too. And so I would assume that for Michael, the feeling of it was much different.
Mm-hmm. So for everyone who's listening and hasn't seen the film, maybe spoiler warning, skip forward 1 minute. But one of my favorite moments is when Stack puts on that vest after, things have gone down at the Juke Joint. He picks it up and it instantly turns into like a really cool badass vampire. What was the conscious decision behind that vest?
That was very intentional. Actually, Michael called me to the makeup trailer when he was getting ready, and he was like, "Why don't we, as Stack, just have the vest on?" And we kind of had to reverse engineer how we were get out of his clothes and how he would put that vest on.
Yeah.
Just have the vest. So he figured it out. And every time I see him put that vest on and look through the hole in the door, I go, yes, like that's how you work together with actors that have an intention for their wardrobe. So we reverse engineered it and figured it out. But yeah, I love that one too.
Yeah, I audibly gasped when he put on that vest. He took a moment before he broke down the door too. I was
Well,
like,
I'm
that's
glad
cool.
you saw that. That's the first time I got asked this question.
Yeah. Well, speaking of how he got out of his clothes, let's talk about Hailee Steinfeld, who was quoted as saying, talking with Ruth Carter was one of my favorite parts of pre-production. Going into Ruth's office and that fitting room and seeing the world on the walls was just the most amazing thing ever. So, her character Mary is very popular. If people love this character, can you speak to Mary's character and how you and Hailee landed on that dress that she wears to the Juke Joint, which I just think is so stunning, and of course, it even looks even better covered in blood.
Oh, yeah. And it was intentional. You know, she appears at the train station in this knit pink, and it's almost like she's like a ghost from his past. And so the idea was, you know, that red, white, and blue palette. And so the pink was like perfect color for her character, as well as for the, you know, the silk that she wears when she comes to the Juke Joint. You know, it's a different fabric than what anybody else has on, and it you know looks luxurious, and it looks like she's coming from outside. It's also a kind of a nude pink, so that when you see the dress later on with all the blood all over it, spoiler alert, you know, it almost disappears, but it's also very kind of translucent. You can see we intentionally wanted to see like her garter and make it sexy and alluring, but we had to make this film so rapidly. We couldn't put on anything that we didn't have multiples on. So her look for the Juke Joint, I think we made about 20 of those dresses because we shot so out of order. So there were days where, you know, she got shot and you had bullet holes through the front and the back. And then there were days when she was just biting Stack and she just had the blood on her face and a little on her dress. There were so many different levels of blood for her character. It was crazy. I have a video of our truck, which looks like a truck full of like plastic wrap.
Shout out to your crew and having to take care of all that continuity too, because that's a pain.
Yeah, and Sammie was shot out of order too, and it's seamless when you see the film, but whew, wow.
You're just like, team, do you mind if we shoot them first and then do everything after?
Yeah, I wish we could have shot that in order. It's impossible. We had rain cover and all that stuff.
Oh man. Well, it worked out. No, you can't tell, but I guess if there's just so much blood, you'll never know. Let's talk about Annie. She's one of my favorite characters. She carries so much power and spirituality in her costumes, and that's, you know, it's beautifully reflected in her costumes. I was fascinated by the details and the colors, the beads and the feathers, just a lot of textiles and like elements throughout her costume. So can you talk about what you wove into her costume and the cultural and spiritual references we might see if you watch it a second time?
Yes. Well, we looked at all those characters, fictitious and supposedly real, of women throughout the ages who practice hoodoo. And we saw there were all of these layers. There's, you know, shawls were used and always like trinkety things. So with Annie, she came in several times because I needed to nail it. I needed to like feel that her look was her own, different from all of these kind of spiritual people who have been in films before. And so we gave her these beads around her neck, and you know, and in my community and in the Black community, in the Latino community, you know, beads are sometimes blessed and people wear them under their shirts. And so those beads were like protective beads, blessed beads, spiritual beads. And so that's why they're kind of clustered and kind of like worn inside. And when we first meet her, she's working in her place where she sells different things to the community. She's that spiritual leader in the community. So we really wanted her to have a mojo bag of her own, a little pouch where she would carry things to cut roots with. And she had a chatelaine with a little bottle, like maybe she carried some healing oils. And then when we get to the juke, and she puts on her dress for the night, it's also in that haint blue color, that protective blue color that is indicative of the Geechee people. And as well, I gave her a little feather headband. I just felt like the feathers and she has an ostrich feather in her hair too. All of those little things would remind us without overwhelming the character. It would just remind us that she had this connection to the spirits.
Right.
And I didn't want it to overwhelm or overpower the scene because she's so brilliantly played Annie. I just really wanted to support it.
We have to talk about the Juke Joint scene that has the world ablaze right now. It's this incredible cinematic moment in which Sammie's music brings together the spirits of both past and future through song and dance. I gasped, Ruth, when you see that first costume and I'm like, what's going on here? And 2 minutes later, you're having one of my favorite moments I've seen in film in the past 5 years. It is so beautiful. I have to imagine, though, this for the costume department must have been a lot of work to bring together all these costumes.
Yes, we we made the girl who is the past spirit, Perline's past spirit, and she has the beads on her, and she's got the beaded like poncho top and the headband. And we painted and we aged those so that they would look like the cowrie shells. And then we had the dancer with the mask. It's called a Zouli dancer. It's from West Africa. And we stripped a lot of fabrics, a lot of Ankara fabrics, and overdyed it purple to, bring about this whole magical dance costume from West Africa. And then we had Papa Tito, who is a Islam player, come through, and we gave him a big agbada. We had so many costumes. We had future spirits walking through. We had Maasai dancers walking through. We had hip hop and we had Memphis Juker. We had a girl who was, doing some hip hop moves in a little cheerleader skirt and a little small, short little bomber jacket. Yeah. And right next to her is an African woman in the same style or short skirt, but it's made of raffia. And she's doing some of the same dance moves. So these connections that we were making from music to dance to cultural, it's like anachronisms, things that you automatically draw yourself to or become a part of your creative process that harken back to your ancestor. Yeah.
Yeah, I could rewatch that scene 1,000 times, and I still don't think I'll see everything.
Yeah, I mean and then you go to the big bonfire and you see them again, but you actually see more. Yeah. So there were costumes that I just made up. I had dancers come in and I said, "Show me the move you're going to do," and once they showed me their moves, I kind of went, into it, creating something that was, at the bonfire, it was definitely like mystical, and so you didn't have to be as locked into being, oh, this is authentic Zulu or this is authentic Turkana. You could play a little bit. So I gave this one dancer a big black feather headdress. And, I love when we get to the bonfire and I see him moving, but then right beside him is the Chinese traditional dancers and the scarf dancer in the pink and Chinese tiger
So beautiful.
It was so beautiful. So to mix all of this, all of these cultures together was an opportunity, was a blessing, and was a joy to create.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I imagine also like you reading that script and being like, we're doing what now?
I know. Yeah, it was written in there. And when we read it, like, I mean, I think in the first week we got together at a production meeting, we were like, did you read that scene? Oh my God. And I'm thinking, don't mess this up, Ruth. Don't mess it up. So I was like focused on it from the start with everything else we had to get
right. Yeah. Speaking of, let's talk about the vampires for a little bit. Big vampire fan, especially in this podcast. I feel like we talk about vampires all the time. But the vampires we see in the Sinners, they're not your typical vampire. You know, they don't have time to throw on an 8-foot black cloak and walk around. And so
bright red.
Yeah, right. No Ishioka vampires this time. So I'm curious if you and your team ever chatted about that conversation though. Like what did your original conversations about the vampires look like? Did you kind of how did you get into that?
When Jack came in, who plays Rimick, we knew that his first scene he'd be in this state of distress. So it was simple tank top and pants, from that period. But he said when he arrives at the Juke Joint, he wanted to look cleaned up. And he actually wanted brand new shoes. They don't look new in all that dirt, but we gave him this whole cleaned up look because he's trying to get in and he looked presentable. And so the same with the Bert and Joan and Bert, who are like kind of his sidekicks there.
Yeah.
There were more scenes in their cabin, they were kind of living up in the Appalachians, and right in the middle of nowhere. It's a wonderful introduction to their little house on the prairie there. And so the red, white, and blue color palette continue. There's a lot of work where a lot of blue, which I think for, the way Autumn Duran Akapa, the way she was shooting, it really did, give the palette like a real cool tone. Yeah. And then so that when you do see the red, it's just like vibrant. Yeah. And so Jack and I, we, discussed, his dress up, from arriving earlier that day in the costume and the clothes that were burning off of his back. And with Joan and Bert too, we cleaned them up, but they still they still remain very simple in the color palette.
I think that's what's so terrifying about them is how pristine, you look out this door and they're just standing there looking like they just left the dry cleaners and you're like, okay, I don't, please don't come in.
Can we come in?
The worst, but very talented music players though, I will say.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Pick poor Robin clean.
Yeah. It would be hard for me not to go outside, I have to admit, but I'm easily convinced. Let's talk about the blood. One of my favorite parts of costume design is aging and dying, the breakdown. Ooh. There is a little bit of sweat and dirt and a whole lot of blood in the Sinners. So talk about your team and the agers and dyers and how they brought this all together. We had a brilliant
team led by the brilliant Sharon Flavel. With Sharon on Black Panther films and on Roots, and we go way back. And I just love how she approaches her work from an artistic point of view. We're always thinking about art, and so with the blood, it was one layer, like from her lab, from her area with her team, and then to set to add the additional layers because we were very much in touch with what Ryan was looking for in terms of, bloody scenes. And we just never seemed to have enough blood. But also the aging was very important to me. That you see the Hogwarts guys come up at the end and, they're sweaty underneath their arms and stuff. That's not by accident. We have to add all that sweat. was constantly like refilling costumers, like water bottles with for sweat, because I knew that this film stock was allowing us to see like great details and, just like the gloss of the skin, and the sweat on the shirts. It was very important. And as I said, we built 90% of this picture.
Yeah.
So things that are made look brand new, and they have to go through the process of aging and dying. And Sharon's small team was able to get it all done. It was really, really a tough job for them and for me,
Yeah.
for all of us.
Right.
It was
Anyone
tough.
touching the costumes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Ludwig Göransson, another repeat collaborator of you and Ryan Coogler. Music is like its own character in this film. So I have to wonder if music played a role in your process as well when looking at the costumes.
Oh my God, absolutely. I played the blues in our shop, in our workshop. Ludwig and Serena, his wife, their office was right next door to ours. So Serena was constantly coming over and telling us about the real blues players that were playing certain parts. There's a lot of musicians in this film, and
wow.
and they would come from all over. They were characters as well, and you know, I just felt like we were tapping into musically, our ancestral spirits just by having these talented musicians come and bless our film with their talent. And so yeah, like Pale Pale Moon, and dressing Perline, and then coming and dressing the piano player who was from Cuba, or dressing a guitarist who flew in from Shreveport or someplace like that. It was so amazing to work that closely with the content of the film and the music and the musicians as well, who were coming in talking about the Lou. As I'm Buddy Guy, just meeting the great Buddy Guy and getting him all dressed, and it was a real pleasure and a blessing to do this film.
Yeah. I mean, before I even saw the film, people were texting me like, you're going to be downloading the soundtrack on Spotify before you even see it. And very true.
It feels like a rock concert towards like the fire. And
it's so funny how something so horrifying could still be so fun and energetic and feel positive, I guess, at the same time.
Who knew?
Yeah. Well, okay, another spoiler warning. Let's talk about the epilogue. This powerful moment set in 1992 when we see an older Sammie, now prolific blues musician, reunited with Stack and Mary. I love Stack and Mary's costumes because I felt like Ruth got to play right here with these costumes. This just felt like a Kinza, like a Ruth moment. So how did you approach designing this time jump? Obviously, you still had to be very conscious of the story, but you didn't want to take it too over the top.
These are things that you just can't do on your own. I can't just put a Coogee sweater at the end of the movie without having multiple conversations with Ryan. And Ryan, the one who really wanted that Coogee sweater. It's like it's called the Gambler, and it's what Biggie Smalls wore.
Yeah.
In one of his videos. So we went to a collector, and he had the original sweater, and it was very important that we not have like one of those remakes. So we examined all of that and had some ideas for Mary as well. The leather jacket that she wore, and all of that was things that came up for Ryan, even though he was like born in the 80s, I think. He knew everything about the 90s, everything, like better than I did. And I was a costume designer in the 90s.
It's so true.
He wanted, Paula Abdul, he wanted something that felt very Paula Abdul for Mary. And so I knew what that was. So I just went right to it. But I was like, here, this guy was like 5 years old when Paula Abdul was doing all of that.
Yeah.
And he could stand on set and like name every sweatshirt, everything that we had there that was authentic from the 90s. He knew like the brands and everything. It was like fascinating to hear him talk about his 90s knowledge.
That's so fun.
It was so fun. Like you're asking him a serious question, and then he looks down at an extra, and he's like, "Is that a BCBG top?" And you're like, "Yes! Oh my God!"
Yeah. Do you want a job on the costume team next film?
Totally. Ryan could be in the costume department.
Well, that brings us to the end of Sinners. For those out there that haven't seen the film, which I find that hard to believe, what do you hope audiences will take away from seeing Sinners for their first time?
That costumes is an art form, and the art form is about color, texture, and most of all, storytelling. And when you approach every film, you have to immerse in the art form. And that's knowing what the DP is going to do, telling the story from the script, having a collaborative spirit. And so I hope people take away that this film was massively collaborative, and our great writer, director, producer, Ryan Coogler, killed it.
Yeah, it shows on screen. You could just feel that everything was very cohesive and everyone really believed in this project. And I think that comes through, just like most of the things you and Ryan have done. Before I let you go, Ruth, can I ask you a question about Vogue World? I actually got to see you speak a few weeks ago at the Chateau.
All right. Wow.
You got to speak next to, of course, one Ariane Phillips and Colleen Atwood, Governor Gavin Newsom, and Anna Wintour for the launch of Vogue World Hollywood, in which all ticket proceeds for the event will be going to the Entertainment Community Fund. I just want to ask you, how you got involved in this, and what you're excited about with this project.
Well, they picked me to be involved, and I was honored to do something that would help the costumers and costume designers who were affected by the fires. I was energized by it, and it's going to be a really amazing event. Runway, fashion show on a studio lot. We're paired with well-known designers. I believe I'm paired with Pharrell for Louis Vuitton, and I'm excited about what we're gonna do together, as well as the show is inspired by the work of costume designers. So fashion is actually following the costume designers, and what inspires them is going to inspire this like fashion that we're gonna create together. So it's a big step in how costumes and fashion can collaborate, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's such a great cause, and I'm so happy to see everyone coming together on this, and I just can't wait to see what comes next from it. Costume designer Ruth E. Carter, thank you so much for talking with me. This has been so much fun. I could talk to you about, what other movies do you want to talk about? Let's do it right now.
Thanks for having
you are in London. We will let you go, but we hope you'll come back and join us for the next film.
All right, I'll be back. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ruth.